I like Electra King in this, and not just because it's Sophie Marceau, but I think she's like a cool and mysterious person. Like, I like that she showed up at the casino because she wanted whoever was trying to kill her to see. I think she's the best character of this so far, including James Bond.
I had an issue with the scene at the Devil's Breath in Azerbaijan, and in real life, it's called Yanar Dag, and I don't think Hindus came from across the world to Azerbaijan, but it is revered by the Zostarians. My issue is that even though Renard has no feeling of pain, if you grab a rock on fire, or actually keep it burning something, your hand will still turn into a barbecue. Your muscles will still not work. Dude, you can't hold this even if you can't feel it.
So now we get Renard. Renard is French for fox. Renard is fine. 009 put a bullet in his brain, so now he's basically Francis from Deadpool. But I'd honestly rather he just be Francis Begbie.
We are officially introduced to Renard during this scene at the Devil's Breath. Is that a real thing? I feel like that's not a real thing. I would believe it if they were like at the Centralia mine fire, but that wouldn't make a lot of sense for the story, I guess. If you want to learn more about that, check out Epic Fails of History. There's an episode where I talk about that. It's a whole mine shaft that like caught on fire and is still burning to this day. Anyway, ex-KGB mercenaries are straight up scary AF.
Now we finally meet Renaud, and he looks stupid, and he sounds stupid, and his vampire lair is stupid. Everything about him is stupid. Bond surprises Davidoff in the back of the car, and then just straight up kills him. But at this point, does Bond even know what's going on? I don't feel like Bond is privy to the same information that we are, so that kill kind of seemed like a little too unjustified.
Bond figures that Davidov, part of Elektra's security, is involved with Renard somehow. So he hides in his car. When Davidov opens the car, Bond's there, sneaky, and shoots him without a silencer, which seems crazy. We know he has a silencer because he'll use it later.
Wow. James Bond just murdered that guy. Don't you need him for questioning? Isn't he important? Like, didn't he just get, like, bitched out by Renard? Isn't this guy, like, the head of King's security or something? I feel like you might have wanted to ask this guy a question before just, like, shooting him in the heart at point-blank range.
Bond is creating a fake ID, and the scene reminds me so much of the American Godzilla film from the year before, just a little bit shorter.
And then he ends up getting in with Renard's men and flies to this site where there is weapons-grade plutonium and also some dirty Russian bombs that are being dismantled by one Dr. Christmas Jones. And Renard is here to steal a bomb.
So we end up in Kazakhstan, and we get Denise Richards, fresh off Starship Troopers and Wild Things.
Oh my god, I love Denise Richards. While I don't remember much of anything from watching the Brosnan movies at a younger age, this was my introduction to her, and I did not forget that Lara Croft outfit.
The subplot of Bond investigating Elektra is all over the place. He sleeps with her, but then investigates her head of security and ends up on a plane to Kazakhstan, where he meets the most ridiculous character ever, Christmas Jones. No, she's not ridiculous because of her name. She's ridiculous in general. She apparently has her own version of Exile, taking apart nuclear bombs. But she's aware of how hot she is to her Russian coworkers. Seriously, she's a pain in the ass. I do enjoy that she tried to trick Bond with Russian, and he responds back fluently. And then when she asked, he told her he learned English at Oxford. That's an English joke. She was capable of kickstarting the security door with a generator and some wires, and it didn't look too easy, so maybe her character is smart, but I just don't like the casting of the role, no matter how hot Denise Richards is.
And then we meet Dr. Christmas Jones, nuclear physicist. Right. Look, I don't hate her character. I don't think she's terrible in this movie. She seems a little bit pointless, extraneous, and she doesn't feel like she fits in this movie, you know? I don't know why they always feel the need to have at least two Bond women for him to, like, romance. I don't think it's really necessary here. You know, it might have been, I feel like maybe the emotional arc of the movie might have been better if there was just Elektra, or if Dr. Jones had maybe a smaller part in the movie. I feel like her character only exists for that throwaway joke at the end of the movie.
Now, I love Starship Troopers. I think that's a great movie. It's one of my favorites from that time period. And like, I don't know. I was 18 when Wild Things came out, so you can do the math there. Denise Richards is in some movies that I've seen. I think she's mostly in this movie because she looks good in shorts and a low-cut tank top, which is fine. Like, Bond girls have gotten by on less. But maybe don't cast her as a nuclear physicist. I know Keanu played one in Chain Reaction, and it was funny then, but Keanu actually turned out to be the shit. So, like, that was, you know, everybody just saw him as Ted Theodore Logan at that point, which is not true. And Denise Richards in this, she became a little infamous for being the first Bond movie, actress, person, anything about a Bond anything to win a Razzie Award. And it proved that, like, big boobs aren't the only requirement for a passable Bond girl.
So, Dr. Christmas Jones feels like she's in the wrong Bond movie. I feel like she should have been in a Roger Moore movie. Her character is completely unnecessary as a love interest. In fact, it actually detracts from the Elektra plot. Elektra, on the other hand, is a very good villain. The final face-off between her and Bond is great.
Honestly, I don't know why her subplot was in there, but I actually really liked Christmas Jones. I'm sorry, Dr. Christmas Jones. Denise Richards could have played a worse character, but at least she was useful. She may have just been eye candy, but she still got the job done, and she knew her shit. And as a person who has always dealt with weird last names, I know where her sarcasm comes from.
So Renard's plan is to just, like, steal the nuke, load it into the back of a Jeep, drive out the front door of the nuclear facility with a nuclear warhead in the back seat, and just, like, 3 guys hanging off the side of the Jeep machine gunning the entire Russian army. And that works, somehow.
The escape scene in the tunnel with Renard and Bond is so cheesy. Bond jumps on that freaking conveyor, treating it like a zipline, while an explosion happens behind him. Couldn't he run faster than that? Like the physics involved would have to be less of a friction coefficient to get the 1970s-style chain thing going faster than a full-grown athletic man running. I did enjoy the grappling hook watch. Again, using gadgets without introducing him, less Chekhov's gun. Big fan. Oh, when climbing the ladder, he gets to grab Denise Richards' ass on the way up.
The scene in the mine where the military are going to check on Bond is so weak. Like, everything about that entire setup is just horrible. Like, the writing is bad, the situation is bad. Like, why are they just now checking on a dude when they've had all these other guys in there that they haven't checked on at all? I don't get it. I hate it.
So during the casino scene, Elektra says, "There's no point in living if you can't feel alive." And I kind of like that line. It's it's a good quote. Feels like a very wise, like, Confucius quote or something you'd read in a fortune cookie. But not only is it poignant, it's also a clue, because later on Renard repeats that line, and we get, like, a great, like, shot of Brosnan's, like, confused face as he's like, oh my god, I've heard someone say that before. And that's how he figures out that Elektra's evil, sort of.
Then, when Bond goes back to meet with Elektra, he just comes right after her, with no backup or truth. You can't just accuse somebody of being a manipulative person like that, especially one with a ton of resources. Whatever, M's gonna teach you, and teach him she does.
Okay, so Bond suspects that Elektra is in on it, and then accuses her of having Stockholm Syndrome and being allied with the bad guys, being allied with the guy who kidnapped and, like, tortured her. This is, like, super dick. This is not, he ends up being right, like, spoiler alert, he's not wrong about this, but he doesn't know this yet. And that is not an accusation you just throw out there if you are not 100% certain of it. Because, like, yeah, dude, that was rough.
Bond faces Elektra and basically unravels the whole plot. You see, he heard both Renard and Elektra say, What's the point of living if you can't feel alive? So he knows that they're working together. And then she's like, nuh-uh. And he's like, oh, okay, I guess you're not.
So this whole second act of the movie really slows down. Like the whole movie like drags to a halt. I can't quite pinpoint what the problem is with it. Even as a fan of the Bond movies, this felt really slow and kind of boring. And that's not what you want in an action movie, you know?
So they go into one of those pipeline tubes that they used to shoot the Soviet general through in Living Daylights, and it's a race, but it's a very dumb one.
Then there's the whole sequence of the pig pipe nuke, and Bond's like, what do I need to disable a nuclear warhead? And for some reason Dr. Jones is there, and she's like, me. First off, lady, you should have been in some interrogation room somewhere in Kazakhstan, because you were part of a nuclear disarmament program that just blew up.
We get a few completely unnecessary action scenes. I think the pipeline scene is one of the more exciting moments in the movie. I think it's kind of cool how him and Dr. Jones, they have to like defuse this nuclear bomb, and then she figures out that like it's missing half of its plutonium or something, which ends up being a clue for something else later on, and Bond decides to let it blow up. They escape just in the nick of time, but he has it detonate so that MI6 and Electra King and M all think that he's dead, that they think they're dead. They all think they're dead, so that he can get to the bottom of what's going on, which I think is kind of a cool move. It's clever.
So Christmas Jones has to defuse a nuclear bomb while going 70 miles an hour in a pipeline tube. And then after they disable it, they bail out of the tube at 70 miles an hour by just jumping out into the pipeline, which, like, I don't know, like, I don't think you can just jump out of a moving vehicle traveling at 70 miles an hour. I think that would probably screw you up pretty bad.
I think it's called an inception ring. It's basically like a go-kart that they use in an oil pipeline. It was kind of fun to watch them go like 70 miles per hour so they could catch up to the torpedo missile thing that was going through the oil pipeline. I know I could never do that. It was just straight terrifying. It's like go-kart on crack. So it's fun to watch.
And then a nuclear bomb shows up in the pipeline, and he and Christmas Jones have to go to dismantle it. But as they're dismantling it, they realize that half the plutonium is missing, which helps Bond realize at the last minute that Elektra really can't be trusted. So he and Christmas Jones let the bomb explode just without the plutonium in it, because that way they can pretend that they died, and then very quickly Elektra finds out that they didn't die.
The bomb is in the pipeline, which seems like a callback to the Living Daylights. In fact, by this point, it really does seem like this movie is a parody of the Bond franchise.
Look, I know Justin's the money guy on this show, but like, what is the expected value of nuking a half-mile stretch of the only oil pipeline supplying the Western powers? Like, I know Sophie Marceau is like 1.5 feet taller than Dame Judi Dench, 30 years younger. She was Isabella the She-Wolf of France. But my money's on M in a fistfight here, hands down. And I would pay $27 or whatever the price of movie tickets today just to watch a supercut of Judi Dench in a tasteful suit, bitch-slapping famous actresses for 90 minutes straight.
I do think the scene with Electra cornering M was pretty good acting. She was ruthless. And then they killed everyone Zordan style, including the computer guy. Oh, and Bond, is it safe to touch a plutonium core? That doesn't seem safe.
I think Electra King really works as both a love interest and a villain. I think she's definitely one of the better Bond villains, especially in some of the newer films. The problem is the movie around her is a little bit lacking.
This scene with Sophie Marceau and Renard is problematic. I didn't like it in 1999 when I saw this movie in the theater, and I do not like it now. It's really uncomfortable, which I think is probably what they're going for, but like, this isn't like Bond movie uncomfortable. This is really weird, and I don't like it.
Elektra finds out that they didn't die because Bond goes to see Valentine again, and Cisco recognizes his car, and Cisco's actually working for Elektra. It turns out Valentine is working for Elektra too. But before we really get into that, we get an awesome action scene where there are these helicopters with saw blades hanging off of them that just fly through and cut up the whole facility.
Why is Bond being such a dick to Hagrid? I thought they were friends. Didn't Hagrid, like, help you out, like, multiple times now?
And then the next time you open your eyes, the stupidest helicopter ever invented is cutting down a caviar factory. Rad! Scoop some popcorn into your face and go back to sleep.
As for favorite gadget, I was really entertained by the can opener on the helicopter that destroyed the caviar factory. I feel like this is our second movie using that type of device. Last time it drilled through a ship, but it's unique and it's kind of interesting, so.
Again, super vague memories when it comes to Brosnan movies, but I also never forgot this dumb chainsaw helicopter. Fun fact, this is a real thing.
The buzzsaw helicopters, much like the airboat paragliders, seem unnecessarily inefficient even by Bond villain standards.
I really like Sikorsky in this movie, but half of the scenes with him feel pointless. The helicopters with the blades are kinda dumb. The explosions are great, but this whole warehouse sequence lacks stakes.
Finally, we get to the scene I remember from the first time I watched this movie. The chainsaw helicopter scene. I thought this was early in the movie, but no, it's like 30 minutes ago. This movie's pacing sucks. Too long. But the scene was fun, and for some reason the stick shift BMW can auto-drive. Probably doesn't grind any gears either. And for an even tinier car than the last one, it still has missiles. But surprise, second helicopter. Bye-bye BMW. Oh, and Hagrid's henchman is owned by Elektra, and he ends up turning on Hagrid and trying to blow it up later.
Oh hey, we finally get to see those surface-to-air missiles that the beamers keep promising us. About 2 seconds before the beamer then just gets sawed in half by a buzzsaw helicopter.
Bond uses the PPQ in the Caviar Factory a ton more than he ever used the PPK in the previous 2 films. This is upsetting.
It seems like Bond is being unnecessarily cruel to Zukovsky here. But okay, Zukovsky gives up Istanbul, and now Bond's gonna go try to rescue M.
And it's a pretty cool action scene. At the end of it, it's revealed that Valentine was helping a submarine. He was diverting a submarine to Elektra's base somewhere so that she could smuggle some stuff. But at the end of it, we get one of those jokes that I just feel like is unnecessary. Valentine is drowning in caviar and looks at his building that's all ripped to shit and says, "We may not have a roof, but at least we have 4 good walls." And then the whole thing falls apart, and he's like, "The insurance company's never gonna believe this." And I don't know. You just, oh, I get the joke, but it's a little broad.
Anyways, Elektra captures M. Russian Hagrid unfortunately dies. We get a couple more completely unnecessary action scenes. Bond has a couple more one-liners. The villains monologue about their plot. Can't remember what it is, but it has something to do with the submarine. The world is not enough.
We cut to the Maiden's Tower in Istanbul, and they have captured M, and she is being held prisoner.
Man, Istanbul is a great Bond movie location.
But don't forget, M's not just like a hard-ass boss. She's the boss of the friggin' Foreign Intelligence Service. She's presumably got a couple decades of field experience, and she comes up with a plan. She plugs the locator card into the 9-volt from the clock to let Bond know where she is. I think that's great. Cool spycraft stuff. I really like it. M is this shit.
My favorite part about this sequence is that M is in prison, and M is crafty as hell. She tricks Elektra into giving her a clock, then uses the clock to turn on the power to the tracking chip from the nuclear bomb that she has had on her all this time, and that helps Bond and everybody else to figure out where she is. Super cool.
M as a prisoner is pretty interesting. Going from the bean counter descriptor from GoldenEye, you'd think she didn't have any training in clandestine arts, or her figuring out the clock that Renard leaves her would have some batteries on it to turn on the locator beacon. That's just smart.
Hey, is Valentine's henchman Cisco of Thongson fame?
The Russian henchman with the gold grill is like a wimpy wannabe Jaws.
So Cisco betrays Hagrid, blows up a bomb, and everyone gets captured. So it turns out that Sophie Marceau was actually the bad guy all along. And once again, Bond didn't see the girl being the bad guy. Like, come on, man. This literally just happened to you like an hour ago.
At this point, it all gets revealed. The actual plan is that they're going to take the plutonium that they got earlier, they're going to stick it into the reactor of a nuclear submarine, which is going to cause an explosion that's going to look like an accident. It's going to blow up Istanbul, and in the process, it's going to block the 3 pipelines that are competing with Elektra's company's pipeline.
So Sophie Marceau puts Bond into an Ottoman torture device, and we get the plot. She wants to build a pipeline and then blow up Istanbul so that she's the only pipeline in town. Now, okay, question. Is she Azerbaijani? We haven't really established this. Her dad is British, like super British. He was friends with M. And Sophie Marceau is like super French and speaks with a French accent. So whose family legacy is she protecting? Like, what is she talking about? What is happening here? I think she might be half Azerbaijani? I don't know. Like, I know I said this about Xenia, but having my neck snap 6 seconds after making out with Sophie Marceau is actually pretty high on my not-so-bad ways to die list. It's definitely better than electrocution. But Hagrid busts in to save James Bond. You're a wizard, Harry!
It's kind of a good guy moment, but he's kind of a villain. It was the moment that Valentine musters up the last remaining bits of life and energy he has to help set Bond free by shooting his shackles in a way that Elektra couldn't see. And I like her response is like, he must have really not liked you.
Zukovsky caps Cisco, wrecks shit, gets shot by Sophie Marceau, then shoots Bond free at the last second, right before he dies.
I'm gonna say, the cane gun is my favorite weapon. Robbie Coltrane, in his last time as this character, uses it to great effect to free Bond from the old Garrote device.
Valentine shows up to the rescue to save Bond from the medieval torture chair he's been tied to. And he comes into the room with a great line. I'm looking for a submarine. It's big and black, and the driver is a very good friend of mine. That's a great line. And then he gets shot to death. Ah, damn. But he's got a gun cane, you see, and he aims it at Elektra, and she sees him. She's holding a loaded gun, and then he slowly aims it across the room. Elektra's already shot him. She's still holding a loaded gun, lets him aim it across the room at Bond, and you think he's going to shoot Bond, but instead he shoots the cuff on the medieval torture chair. And then Elektra says, oh, he really hated you. Why didn't you just shoot him, Elektra? You would have gone away with your whole plan if you just shot him. But instead, Bond kills you.
Bond chases Sophie Marceau upstairs, frees M, and I like that when he frees M, he shoots the lock, he doesn't say anything. He just shoots the lock, lets her fend for herself. It's a cool touch, and it speaks a lot to the mutual respect that they have for each other. He knows that M's capable. He knows that if he can just, shoot the lock, she's on her own, she can take care of herself, and she understands that, he's in pursuit, and he's not, this isn't the time to ask for a status update. That's cool.
Oh, and Bond finds out that Elektra seduced Bernard, not the other way around. She wasn't a Stockholm victim, she was a manipulative bitch. She ties Bond to an ancient torture device, and shoots Hagrid, who comes to help Bond and his nephew, but he's shot. His dying act is to free Bond with the cane gun he has, allowing Bond to kill Elektra. Thank you.
Wow. Bond just murdered an unarmed woman. Yeah, I know, she's evil and the devil and all that, but her story was so tragic, and it didn't feel satisfying when she died. Maybe they didn't make her evil enough, maybe they should have done more cruel stuff with her, maybe she should have tortured M or something so that we want her to die, I don't know. But when Bond shoots her, it feels really fucked up and not cathartic, as it usually does when he does this kind of thing. They go immediately into some big action sequence aboard the sub, but for the next 5 minutes, you're like, what the fuck was that? And it takes a lot of weight out of the last act. He had a lot more chemistry with Sophie Marceau than he ever does with Denise Richards, so picking Denise Richards and wanting to save her seems hollow and empty. We don't care. We don't even remember that she'd been kidnapped. Instead, we're just sitting there thinking, why the hell did he just shoot Sophie Marceau in the heart from, a foot and a half away while she wasn't even armed? He handed her the transmitter, and was like, well, call off your men. But then she was like, dive, and he shot her. But like, he'd have done the same thing in that situation. This is like capturing Blofeld, and instead of arresting him, you hand him the nuclear codes, and then when he starts to relay the nuclear codes to his guys, you shoot him, right? Like, M's in the next room. She can take Sophie Marceau into custody. You don't have to murder this woman in cold blood. This was really fucked up, and I really didn't like it.
Renard has tricked Hagrid's nephew to bring in a nuclear sub into Istanbul's harbor for smuggling purposes. But he kills the entire crew, and wants to use the reactor to kill the 8.5 million people in Istanbul, or Constantinople. No, Istanbul. And destroy the ports so that Electra's pipeline is the only one going through the region. I looked up the Victor-class sub, or any sub really, but there is no fuel fabrication plant actually on a sub. All reactors in the military get fuel when they are commissioned, and then they get refueled when they are overhauled, not on the fly. You just don't melt down random plutonium or uranium you find for use as a top-up.
Then when you wake up, the girl from the Wild Things is swimming around in a submarine in a white top. Perfection.
So Bond seizes the engine room to raise the sub, but instead of raising the sub, he points it straight down, so it is pointing directly towards the ocean floor, which seems really odd because James Bond is a commander in the Royal Navy, and he should know this sort of thing. Bond could fly the friggin' experimental sub at the beginning of this movie without even looking at the instruction manual, and there's literally only one of those things in the entire world. And like, literally 5 minutes from now, he knows which button to open, to push that will like open a submarine bay hatch, even though all of the buttons are labeled only in Cyrillic. You're really gonna tell me that he knows which button on this random control panel opens the forward torpedo hatch or whatever, but he literally doesn't know which way is up on a submarine? James Bond doesn't know how to make a submarine go up or down?
During the sinking submarine segment, Bond holds his breath for an impossibly long time.
So Bond holds his breath for 1 minute and 27 seconds of screen time here. I was going to make some joke about it when I originally timed it, but then I looked it up and it turns out that the average person is supposed to be able to hold their breath underwater from anywhere to like 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And then in 2012, some German freediver held his breath underwater for 22 minutes. So what the hell do I know?
The whole sub scene at the end of this movie is painfully long. The fight scene is one of the dumbest yet, but I do like the water effects. Something about how they did every single scene that involved water rushing in, whether it be beneath them or above them, like everything was timed well, and there was so much pressure that you could feel kind of the terror of what's about to happen.
So Renard's going to kill himself in this process, but he's fine with that because he's already dead. Do the men that are on the submarine helping him know that this is a suicide mission? I wonder. Anyway, the submarine sinks. It ends up vertical, so we get a cool action scene where Bond and Renard are like fighting each other in a room that's tipped vertically, that has posts that are supposed to go from floor to ceiling, but now they make like cool action monkey bars for them to fight on. It's a great environment for a fight scene, and eventually he kills Renard in the dumbest way possible by like using a pressurized tube of air to push the nuclear rod out of the tube it's in and into Renard's chest. It's weird.
And we finally get to the final action scene in the movie, which was actually pretty good. This whole fight between Bond and Renard on the submarine was kind of great, and I love the way that he dispatches him with one of the radiation rods, one of the plutonium rods, right through the chest. Just pins him. I think it's great.
Bond impales Renard with a reactor control rod and he dies. And I'm like, they should have done more with the feels no pain thing, right? Like maybe I'm spoiled by Deadpool, but that never really seems to come up. Like I thought it might have been cool to like shoot him or stab him or something and he feels nothing. Some kind of battle where, Bond keeps like injuring him mortally and the guy's like, he can't move his arm anymore, but he doesn't feel pain. He's not making any noises. But they kind of miss out on an opportunity with that. I don't like the sub fight at the end. And like, I'm still so jarred by the Sophie Marceau thing that none of this, just all this whole third act just feels like kind of hollow and and I feel bad, you know?
After some shenanigans in the sub, Bond and Renard have a pretty lame fight. A dying man versus a broken spy. But the plutonium rod is shot at subsonic speeds, breaking Renard with some blunt force drama.
Favorite kill. At the very end, the plutonium rod to the heart. It was a great way to kill Renard, but it was also the last big kill of the movie, meaning this slow and painful movie was finally over.
So M goes back to the Highlander castle, and Bond sets the damn agent speedrun record for bad puns made about the female lead's ridiculous name by making like 25 Christmas jokes in 6 seconds.
Bond and Christmas Jones get picked up by a boat that they probably have sex on. But that's not the only time they have sex on, because then they use infrared cameras to locate Bond for some reason. And they're like, oh man, his infrared light is getting even warmer. And then they shift around and you can see that it's Bond having sex. And you'd think the movie would end there, but it doesn't.
Christmas and Bond escape last minute before the ship implodes a few hundred feet down at the harbor. So it ends with Bond in the water with a girl. No, wait, they end up having sex in some hotel balcony, and Bond has Christmas in Turkey. And Christmas only come once a year, but this time it's twice. Because sex.
Christmas only comes once a year. But do you get it?
And then the next time you wake up, the screen will say James Bond will again return, and you'll know it's time to grab your backpacks and your mates, and you can all wholeheartedly agree that was the best James Bond movie you've ever seen, as you quickly race back to Spencer Street Station to catch the 6:10 to Warrnambool.
I love Pierce, but this is one of the worst movies to watch in the whole series. So drawn out and so pointless.
I don't know. It was okay. It had some okay action scenes and stuff, but this is not my favorite. It's not my favorite Brosnan movie. It's not my favorite Bond movie. This is like lower tier for me.
And that is The World Is Not Enough. It is the worst of the Pierce Brosnan ones that we've seen so far by a large margin. It felt like a Roger Moore movie down to the skiing stuff and the bad puns, but it had like some of the screwed up, dark, want to take a shower after you watch it stuff from some of the, the License to Kill. I don't know. I've liked the Brosnan ones up to this point, but this movie feels super problematic, and it just left a really bad taste in my mouth. Like, Bond isn't supposed to kill defenseless people, right? You gave her the transmitter. What did you think she was going to do with it? You'd have done the same thing in that position. I don't know. This didn't work for me. Maybe I'm weird and I'm just like fixating on this one thing that bothered me about it. I think probably most people will just complain about Denise Richards and this is like my weird thing, but it feels bad and wrong, and like James Bond isn't being a good guy, and even the good parts are massively outweighed by the parts that I thought were like super problematic. Also, like, Denise Richards probably is super annoying in real life, although I have nothing to base that on.
I'll say it again, this was not a good movie. It had some good parts. They're getting good at streamlining the gadget reveal. Bond is shown more capable, more in control of how he approaches the situation, but this movie was about 45 minutes too long. Good editing, kill half the Elektra story, put Christmas Jones in a supporting role and not ally, and you'd have a tight action adventure. More creepy Renard, less begging Elektra. And let's face it, in 1999 this isn't the best storyline that could have run. There was much more going on in 1998, 1999 that would have been translated than an oil crisis. Say that for post 9/11. I mean, this is the same year that The Matrix came out. Is this movie on the level of The Matrix? Hell no.
Here's where I get lengthy. As stated earlier, this movie feels like a parody or homage of a Bond film. Unfortunately, it's an actual Bond film. GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies really did some grand things to kind of revive the name Bond, but this went straight back to the days of Connery and Moore with plot, development, and how several female characters were written. Denise Richards was criticized for her role in this film despite enjoying the character. Her role in Starship Troopers 2 years prior was so much better than this. As a character, she never really existed outside of awkwardly placed dialogue, and the costume designer apparently had as big of a crush on her as I do, and it shows. Seriously, why did she have that dress at the caviar factory? She was always my Bond girl, but that mantle has officially been passed to Carol Bouquet from For Your Eyes Only. Denise Richards would have been so much better if they leaned into her mysterious past by letting her pick up a gun at least once in this film, then made a reference to learning how to use it at Oxford.
Again, I'm gonna have to call out Bond's one-liners and responses to make Brosnan a break Bond. Checking the figures, all the Christmas jokes, I don't know any doctor jokes. He's the shining light of this movie.
Yeah, overall, unfortunately, I think The World Is Not Enough is a step in the wrong direction. This movie has some pacing issues, I think. Especially compared to Tomorrow Never Dies. Feels like they took a lot of the wrong lessons from that movie. This feels like they were just cranking another movie out. Maybe it was just too much exposition, or they were going for something, but they didn't quite stick the landing. I don't know if it was because they didn't know what they wanted the movie to be, because they threw in a lot of like funny throwaway lines, and there's a lot of lighthearted moments, but there's a lot of like really serious moments, and it seems like the tone in this one's kind of all over the place. I think Tomorrow Never Dies, like they managed that balancing act, whereas this one, it just kind of falls apart, unfortunately, because I think the opening is awesome, and I think the ending's pretty good too. It's just that whole middle section of the movie is a bit of a slog. Maybe if they had taken a little bit longer on like really ironing out the script. It just seems like this movie has a bit of an identity crisis. It keeps bouncing back and forth between super cheesy and very deadly serious. And I don't think it quite works. It's a couple of really good villains.
Renard was a weak villain who can't even enjoy sex with the Psycho Electra. He's not that intimidating. He's just an ex-KGB agent, and he's no Red Grant. At least he has like an actual superhero power, lack of feeling or pain. That's different.
Renard's kind of a cool villain. He's creepy, like, because he's just like deadpan all the time. But even that, he's not really deadpan. He would be creepier if he was deadpan all the time, but he's like super jealous about Bond. There's a scene where he's like, is he a better lover than me? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It wasn't bad. It just didn't do it for me.
I'll give this movie its due. I like that the actual villain, Electra, isn't super shitty. She has a real reason for existing. I love stories where the villain was created by the supposed heroes. So yeah, this is like, it's a cool concept, just bad execution.
But I think the movie just drags on a little too long, and I don't think it's Pierce Brosnan's fault. You definitely can't blame him. I actually think he makes a really solid Bond, and this one, and especially the next one, I don't think that he really had a lot of good material to work with. But ultimately the character Bond himself is very one-dimensional in these later Brosnan films. It seems like they were trying to lean away from the Timothy Dalton era of Bond and kind of go back to the Roger Moore movies, maybe a little too much, with him constantly talking in one-liners and stuff, and it barely worked in some of those movies, and I don't think it works here at all. So yeah, that's The World Is Not Enough. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough.
Before leaving, I guess I will say some positive things. We have the double fake villain, which was good writing. I'll give them that. M does things. Zukovsky helps, which makes his role in GoldenEye much less random and like, oh cool, we have a repeat character. And Goldie, the British producer, plays the henchman with the gold teeth. So there's that. That's The World Is Not Enough. It was enough for me. This was enough for me.
All that said, next up is Die Another Day. And while it's not a good Bond movie per se, I do think it falls in the category of being so bad it's good, because that movie is bonkers. And so hopefully that means it'll at least be entertaining, because so I feel like even though this one might be a better movie, I think Die Another Day might be more fun to watch. Hopefully a little less boring. We'll see. Can we just skip to Daniel Craig, man? We're almost there. We're like 2 movies away from Casino Royale. This is killing me. I just want to talk about Daniel Craig.
This movie was unnecessarily long. There were useless subplots and about 30 minutes that could have easily been clipped out of this movie, making it move a little bit faster. This could just be my opinion, but it almost seems like all of Pierce's movies were recorded in like 1 month, and they were like, the first one, GoldenEye, they did so good and they had all that energy, and the second one started to not be as good, and this third one is just losing momentum. So, dear James Bond overlords, please make the next one not be as bad. I don't remember it, even though I love all of Pierce's movies. But I'm setting my expectations low and hoping that his last movie of the series will be a good one.
Anyway, that was World Is Not Enough. We will be back soon with Die Another Day, which I have actually never seen. When we started doing this, I forgot there were 4 Brosnan movies. I've never seen it, so can't be worse, right?
Podcasters Assemble Season 003 is a production of the We Can Make This Work Probably Podcast Network. Find more of our shows at probablywork.com and learn how to contribute to future episodes of Podcasters Assemble by looking us up on Twitter at Casters Assemble or joining our Discord server, link in the show notes. Submissions are always open. Thank you to everyone who was able to contribute to this episode. Be sure to check the show notes for links where you can find them all online. Thank you.
This has been a presentation
of the We Can Make This Work
Probably Network.
Follow us on Twitter
at probablywork
for more of our questionable content.
Also, we have a website called probablywork.com.
Podcasters Assemble will return in Die Another Day.
Die another day. Die another day.
So, see you then.
When Bond tells the dealer to bury the top 3 cards of the deck, is that a Magic card reference?